So here we are now. We just finished day 2 down in Barcelona, right? This is a day trip from Barcelona going to another wonderful place. And it's the Benedictine Abbey, Santa Maria de Montserrat. And you can see that it is beautifully nestled in the mountains about 38 minutes to the north and to the west of Barcelona. Next slide, if you would, please. So this is another depiction of that. Montserrat, translation, Catalonian language, the Catalonian area down by Barcelona, it's pronounced serrated mountain. And so you can see the serrations in the far left under the blue sky. There's a lot of serrations in the mountains around this abbey of Montserrat. And what a beautiful setting it is to see. The abbey is accessible via autos, and like we took the bus up the hill, a winding road. You can go by train, you can walk through footpaths, and you can take a cable car up. And it is the second most traveled. There's, of course, the church we just saw, La Sagrada Familia. And then, Father, what's the one in northern Spain that's the pilgrimage site? Thank you. I could never pronounce it. It does it. And I was impressed. That's the first, that's the site. In fact, in the Middle Ages was the site. Montserrat now is the second most popular pilgrimage in Spain, as to my understanding. And you can also take it by train and go up to the highest peak. The Catalonian mountain range is Sant Jeroni, and it's reachable via the paths that go up around the abbey. We didn't all go to the highest peak, but some of us did take a little time. So if you go to the next slide. Wow. How about that? Look at the view, huh? Just like your backyards, right? Just incredible views. And Montserrat, it's, besides being a beautiful setting, has a lot of history. And it's this setting here near Barcelona. Hermit monks have lived there since the 9th century AD. The abbey was later built and really founded in the 11th century, if you will, but they started living in caves and occupying the space at Montserrat in the 8th century, well, the 9th century, 800s. Then it was rebuilt in the 19th and 20th century. We'll talk more about that because Napoleon had his way with Montserrat and unfortunately destroyed much of it. Then there are now on average about 80 monks that inhabit Montserrat and call it home. And that's the average. The elevation is about 4,055 feet above sea level. And of course this area is beloved by Spain. I heard somebody's from Spain. I heard that someone earlier. It is beloved by Spain, Montserrat, right? And Columbus named Montserrat Island, right, in the Caribbean. We found after they loved it so much, so he used that name. Now, if we go to the next slide, you can see the basilica. Now, we saw a wonderful basilica earlier. This is also a very beautiful basilica that we had the great opportunity to sing in. The outside has many statues. I believe 171 statues. And then there are many beautiful buildings. There's a hotel, and it's a pilgrimage site, so they do retreats there. So it would be one of those, if you love the outdoors, and we have some people that do love the outdoors and hiking, what a wonderful place to go. You can do a retreat, you can do the outdoor hiking, you can go up to the top and take the tram. There's all kinds of things that you could do, besides just being in a beautiful holy space. So now if we go to the next slide, this is the courtyard, if you will, of the abbey. And this courtyard is only 50% there. To what they told us is that the other half was destroyed by the fire when Napoleon attacked. Now, in 1808, the French tried to get a hold of the mountain because it was a high ground. And the monks had fled before the battle, so the Spanish army took over the area and secured it. And the French were managed to get a lot of the territories around it, but they could not take this territory. When they finally did bring 10,000 men in the second time around, they were able to burn some of it down the first time with their fires, but the second time they actually did take it. And it was very partially destroyed. In fact, one account said that Our Lady, the Black Madonna, was destroyed in that fire. Now, I've seen other accounts when I was doing my research that said that's the original one. So I don't know the answer to that. If anybody does, feel free to say yes, that's the original one. But one account said that she is not, and that some studies have shown that she was built later on, 1200. So, but the recovery of the monastery became a big deal for the Catalonian area. And with that, renowned patriotism over holding this holy place. And so the Catalonian people took it on. And in fact, you all saw Gaudí, the artist and architect, so he put his hands on Montserrat as well, but to a much smaller scale. He had his hands kind of full. But he built one of the Stations of the Cross as you walked up toward the cave. The other, in 1880, the official anthem of Montserrat, the Viroli song, which I believe the boys' choir performed, and then Pope Leo declared Our Lady of Montserrat the patron saint of Catalonia. Not Spain, but just Catalonia. And then there's another, in its history, there's also the same person who Pope Jules II asked Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel at one time was the abbot of Montserrat. So, little tidbit. So it's a wonderful place. If we can go to the next slide. Well, there's lots of trails, and we had fun, as you can see, up on the trails, going up to the top, following. We only did a few, but several others. Everybody went their own way because we had an hour or two of free time before we were going to go in to sing at the cathedral. The travels and the trails, I believe they have some 17 different trails there, and they all surround it, and you can access it by various different ways. But if you ever want to go on another trip, the next slide please, I think I'd want to go back to this one because this is called The Stairway to Heaven, and one of my favorite songs in the 70s. I don't know. So that one's called, and did anybody get that eye? Michael, you went quite a ways. Did you see The Stairway to Heaven? Because it looks like a wonderful thing to see way up on the top.
I did not see that.
Yeah. So,
To the top.
yeah, because it's a lot. I mean, their trails are immense. But if we do go back, I've also learned more about more good reasons to go back to Spain. And we went to Italy just as a side, and I loved Italy, but Spain, I want to go back to Spain. There's so much more to see, and such a beautiful, beautiful country. So now let's go to the next slide, please, because this is the other thing that sets Montserrat on another level plane, and that is the Black Madonna, which you saw a picture in the very first slide. So the Black Madonna has lots of history as well, and she resides in her sanctuary above, overlooking the whole church. And we had to go, you have to, if you visit there, get a second ticket to go see her, and they take you up in groups, one at a time. You get to pray before her. She is really enclosed in glass, and she has a crown, if you would. She's made of wood, and there's lots of theories as to why she is black, but the main one that sounds the most is that she is wood, and the whole theory is that she dates back to when Saint Luke carved her in early Christianity. Now that's one theory. There are others, but she goes back to early Christianity. And so she is cherished by Spain. And she's cherished all over the world because there are 50 versions of her. This is the original that we saw. There are 50 versions of her in Spain. There are 500 versions of her in all of Europe. And there's one version of her in Eureka, Missouri. Anybody know where Eureka, Missouri is? I don't know. But if St. Luke constructed her in early Christendom, then over the years, the theory, all the candles to the left, there have been many candles and votives around her, and the soot will take and change the color and create a patina on the wood that turns her black. So that is the strongest theory. There are others as well. What does she symbolize? A lot of different things to different people as well. But the strengthhood of feminism or female is one of them. The baby is also in her lap. The strong sentiment of the Holy Family again. She also, in Spain, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe they have a great respect, as we saw in La Sagrada, for nature. And she also is a protector of nature. So we can go to her with prayers. There have been many miracles placed upon her for people that are healed. When they are able to touch her hand, there's one spot where you can touch, is if you lift your other hand up to Jesus and touch that hand to the spot that is visible on the Madonna, the black Madonna, then your prayers may be answered. Now, she goes back to, in early Spain, when they had an invasion. The Moors invaded Spain, and they feared she was down in town. They feared that she would be taken. So this is 600 or so. Now, they hid her in a cave up near Montserrat. Well, things got chaotic for a while. 200 years later, some shepherd boys in this area saw light emanating from this cave. They didn't know what it was. They saw it again, and this time they reported it to someone who might sounds familiar too with Fatima, doesn't it? So they reported it, and they went up and discovered her buried deeply in the cave. So this light was emanating from the cave. Then they tried to carry her back down to town. But she became heavier and heavier, and they could not, they finally realized that she was speaking to them, and that she was trying to say, no, I want to stay here. And so they made the decision at that point. They took her back up and decided, this is now in the 800s, the 9th century, that they would build this abbey, and then so in the 11th century it happened. So this is the other thing that the Montserrat is famous for. It's not the OLP choir, although we'd like to think we are.
We're infamous.
This is our touch with fame. That's right. But here we are singing, and it was a beautiful sound, which I know in the videos that will be out. This was one of the most touching of all the things that we did. There was another one that someone will talk about that was also very touching. But then we preceded these young boys. But this is the reason, another reason besides the Black Madonna. The Escolania de Montserrat, they travel the world. It's supposed to be the best boys choir in all of Europe. Now, one of the things we were wanting to touch on, and I will do it here, is what was in this pilgrimage was important to me personally? Well, there are multiple things. Montserrat was important to me because I went to Creighton University in Omaha, which is a Jesuit school, as you might know. And so Montserrat, and this, before I get to that, this is my uncle Charles and my dad's brother, who was a Jesuit priest at Creighton. He was the bursar at Creighton till he died. But because I have an affinity to the Jesuits, this Montserrat is also very important to them because he was born in Loyola, way up here, but then he also, let's see, and near Barcelona, went to Montserrat. So he fought, St. Ignatius of Loyola, fought in the war and was injured gravely in the war. In fact, he was crippled for the rest of his life due to this injury. He was taken to Montserrat, and as you might, probably the way I understand it, the army was still controlling Montserrat. But he was taken there to recover. Well, he appeared before the Black Madonna, and he stayed there for 11 hours and laid down his sword for good and decided that he wanted to go in another direction for his life. And of course, the rest is history. So he laid down his sword and then decided to go down the hill. He had a confessor there at Montserrat for quite a long time, named Father Zenon, and he spent 3 days with him confessing and counseling. And then he ended up going down to Manessa, which is a little town not far from there, and he went into a cave for 11 months. And in that cave, he wrote the Spiritual Exercises, which is his biggest work, and that was the beginning of the Jesuits, if you will. And it's the next slide, if you will. The other reason that this was an important journey, a pilgrimage for me, was that we had the Carlos Acutis presentation. How many of you went to that presentation here, where he showed all of the miracles of the Eucharist, or many of them? And this is one of the slides from that presentation. And it's cut off, I'm sorry, but it's Montserrat at the top, you can see. So it was considered one of the miracles of the Eucharist at this site. Well, I was looking at those slides because we were preparing to go to Italy and over to Spain, and I said, wow, we have the opportunity to see several sites here. And fortunately, James made this happen. We saw Montserrat, and we saw another one right after Montserrat, which we'll discuss in a minute. And then we went to one in Italy as well, in Rome. So these were the sites of the Eucharistic miracles. So I made it a personal commitment before this trip to really come closer to the Eucharistic, faith in the Eucharist. And this was one of the reasons why this site was important to me. Now, the miracle that happened here was there was a young girl that came up, and the general, they had a conference, if you will, because there is sites all the way back hundreds of years. This is in the year 1657. The general of the Benedictine Order of Spain came up to this conference, and he was speaking with the abbot, and this young girl said, please do 3 masses for my father who has passed. I know he's in purgatory, and I want him to please pass forward into heaven, and I know that if you do these 3 masses, he will do so. So she brought the abbot to tears, and he couldn't refuse. So the two together made sure the masses happened. In the first mass, during the Eucharist, she described to the priest that she saw her father in flames, and is currently in flames. And they were skeptical. They asked if they gave her a tissue and said, would you please put this into the flame? And then they didn't see this, but once she put the tissue in, everybody in the whole basilica at Montserrat saw the flame. So it became a miracle of the Eucharist. Second Mass, he appeared to her again. This time he was in multicolored suits, no flames. The third time he was in all white and was taken, up to heaven. So another miracle associated with her, besides the many ones that we don't know about, individual miracles of health, healing, and some of the Spanish feel that she's helped them win wars. That is my presentation, if you will, on Montserrat